Okay, sorry guys. The last video ended too soon. I tried to pause and accidentally hit stop. Again, we're in chapter 8 of Beautiful Outlaw, Scandalous Freedom, page 88. But they always have their reasons. The leaders of this college will fight for the policies they've created. This is an old joke about... Oh, there's an old joke about why Baptists don't make love standing up. Because people might think they're dancing. It captures the absurdity of legalism beautifully. This measly, pecune, trivial, petty rulemaking actually ends up hardening your heart to God while stiffening your self-righteousness. No wonder Jesus hates this stuff. Some Pharisees and teachers of the law came to Jesus from Jerusalem and asked, "Why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? They don't wash their hands before they eat." And Jesus replied, "You hypocrites! Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are but rules taught by men." Jesus called the crowd to him and said, "Listen and understand. What goes into a man's mouth does not make him unclean, but what comes out of his mouth, that is what makes him unclean." When the disciples came to him and asked, "Do you know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard this?" He replied, "Every plant that my Father has not planted will be pulled up by the roots. Leave them, they're blind guides. If a blind man leads a blind man, both will fall into a pit." Peter said, "Explain the parable to us." "Are you still so dull?" Jesus asked them. "Don't you see that whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach and then out of the body? But the things that come out of the mouth come from the heart, and these make a man unclean. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. These are what make a man unclean. But eating with unwashed hands does not make him unclean." Matthew 15, 1-2, and 7-20. You can hear his disgust. Hypocrites, blind guides. Then, as with the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus sets before us a deeper, truer view of holiness. The issues are first and foremost internal, before they are ever external. You can murder someone without ever pulling a trigger. You break the Sabbath if come Sunday night you're exhausted, especially if you've been exhausted by church, letter, and spirit. All those external rules of men do nothing to promote a genuine holiness, but they do make people, Pharisees, by the truckload. Jesus' freedom is a difficult thing to teach on for many reasons. Let me name 2. First, there are certain types who will hear this and find in it as an excuse to live as they please. Many characters in our irreverent age don't care what others think. Their freedom is abrasive and unholy. The freedom Jesus models is not a crass, give the finger to the world or the church for that matter. Others will dismiss the freedom Jesus offers out of fear, either fear of what people might think, which ironically is sin, or the fear of falling into immorality. So let me be very clear. The scandalous freedom Jesus models for us is based in an understanding of a holiness much deeper than anything the religious ever concocted. Remember, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. From Matthew 5:20. The only possible way that can happen is through an internal revolution, a changed heart. When we have a heart like Jesus's. One more example. One of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, so he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at table. When a woman who had lived a sinful life in the town learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house, she brought an alabaster jar of perfume, and she stood behind him at his feet weeping. She began to wet his feet with her tears, and she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. Luke 7:36 through 38. Whoa, here's another yet scandalous scene. This fallen woman is wiping Jesus' feet with her hair and kissing them? A very intimate encounter. She obviously has lost her capacity to care what the nice people think. Jesus doesn't seem to have ever bothered trying that capacity on. He is no respecter of persons. Not at least as it is with most folks in this world, especially leaders. This is utterly remarkable in the society of the religious, for the fear of man rules that world. What good people might think is a very, very powerful motivator, and the raison d'être for most of the ridiculous policies. When the Pharisees who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, "If this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner." Can you believe the arrogant self-righteousness of these guys? It is a sinner who invited him to dinner. It is a sinner who is running the synagogue too. Jesus answers patiently this time. Apparently, this Pharisee is open to a new way of understanding goodness. And Jesus answered him, "Simon, I have something to tell you." "Tell me, teacher," he said. 2 men owed money to a certain moneylender. One owed him 500 denarii and the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back, and so he canceled the debts of both. Which of them will love him more? And Simon replied, "I suppose the one who had the bigger debt canceled." "You have judged correctly," Jesus said, from verses 39 to 43. Having rescued Simon from the religious spirit, Jesus turns to attend to the precious heart of this brave woman who has entered so boldly, so humbly. She is exposed to the scornful stares of the other guests. They are whispering loudly, and Jesus covers her. Then he turned toward the woman and said to Simon, "Do you see this woman? I came into your house. You did not give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss, but this woman, from the time I entered, has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, for she loved much. But he who has been forgiven little loves little." Then Jesus said to her, "Your sins are forgiven." And the other guests began to say among themselves, "Who is this who even forgives sins?" And Jesus said to the woman, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace." Luke 7:44 through 50. If you don't understand this scene, you won't understand Christian holiness. If you don't find this one of the most beautiful stories you have ever read, you won't want Christian holiness. And you sure won't understand Jesus. The man is free. Free from what people think. Free from religion. Free from false obligation. People won't like it. People won't understand it. They'll draw false conclusions, point fingers, and worse. He's free of all that. Oh, to be so free. The more you fall in love with Jesus' genuine goodness, which is true goodness, the more you will absolutely detest the counterfeit of a false piety and a shallow morality, as he did. Jesus has a wild freedom born out of a profound holiness, which makes him the most remarkable person I have ever known. To do them justice, the people who crucified Jesus did not do so because he was a bore. Quite the contrary. He was too dynamic to be safe. It has been left for later generations to muffle up that shattering personality and surround him with an atmosphere of tedium. Alright, guys, we made it. That was the end of chapter 8 for today's date, which is whatever it is, August 4th, I believe. Tomorrow will be chapter 9, Cunning. Hope to see you then.